chilling road, a nightmare come to life. Some roads take you home, some roads take you somewhere unknown, and some roads shouldn't exist at all. Tonight's story is about a road in West Virginia, a road that locals refuse to name, a road that has no beginning, no end, and once you're on it, you can't turn back. If you ever find yourself driving down an empty highway and your GPS suddenly stops working, if your radio turns to static, if you feel like you're being watched, you might be on Black Hollow Road, and you might never leave. The Disappearing Road. In 1983, a truck driver named Henry Jacobs was delivering cargo through West Virginia when he made a wrong turn. His GPS showed nothing, his radio went silent, he should have been on the main highway, but somehow he wasn't. Henry kept driving, thinking it was just a back road. Then he saw it, a figure standing in the middle of the road, not waving, not moving, just watching. Henry hit the brakes, and that's when he noticed the road behind him was gone. There were no turns, no exits, just endless, twisting blacktop stretching into the darkness. Henry never made it to his destination. His truck was found 2 days later, still running, headlights on. But Henry? The ghost in the rearview mirror. In 1999, a woman named Lisa Carter was driving home from work late at night. She had taken the same route for 5 years. But on this night, she missed a turn, and suddenly, the road looked different. The trees were too tall, the pavement was too smooth, and the moonlight didn't reach the ground. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She checked her rearview mirror and froze. There was a man sitting in her back seat, smiling. She swerved off the road, nearly crashing into a ditch, but when she turned around, the back seat was empty. Lisa floored it, desperate to get away, but the road never ended. She drove for hours, heart pounding, until finally she saw headlights in the distance. A gas station. She pulled in, shaking, barely able to breathe. The clerk looked at her and said, "You came from the hollow, didn't you?" Lisa never drove that road again, and neither should you. The walkers in the fog. In 2015, a group of teenagers dared each other to drive Black Hollow Road at midnight. They didn't believe the stories. They should have. The road was silent. No insects, no wind, no sound. Then, the fog rolled in, thick. And in the distance, they saw them, figures walking along the road, not people, something else. Their movements were wrong. Their bodies were too long, too thin. And their faces had no eyes. One of the teenagers panicked. He hit the gas, trying to drive through the fog. The figures didn't move. But the moment something slammed into the roof, a heavy crawling sound like hands scraping metal. Then a voice, "Turn around." They didn't. They sped forward, desperate to escape. And just like that, the fog was gone. They were back on the highway, like nothing had ever happened. But when they got home, the car roof was dented, and in the dust were handprints, not human ones. The road that never ends. Black Hollow Road isn't marked on maps. It appears when it wants to. Some say it's a trap, a place that hunts. Some say it's a doorway to something waiting on the other side. But those who survive it, they all say the same thing. Something was in the car with me. So if you ever find yourself driving down a road that wasn't there before, if your GPS reroutes you, if you see figures in the fog, do not stop, do not turn around, because once you enter Black Hollow Road, you may never leave. That's tonight's story. If you've ever driven down a road that felt wrong, maybe you weren't alone. If you liked this story, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more terrifying tales. And let me know in the comments, what's the scariest thing you've ever seen on a deserted road? Until next time, sleep well. The haunted mirror, what they don't want you to know. Some mirrors reflect reality, some mirrors distort the truth, and some mirrors hold something inside. Tonight's story is about a mirror that should have never been found. A mirror that doesn't just show your reflection. It watches, it waits, and if you stare too long, it will stare back. The Forgotten Antique. In 2012, a woman named Emily Rhodes moved into a small apartment in Savannah, Georgia. She was a college student, living on her own for the first time, excited to decorate her new space. One afternoon, while exploring an old thrift store, she found a mirror. It was beautiful, an antique, framed in dark oak, carved with strange symbols along the edges. The store owner sold it to her for almost nothing, saying, "Most people don't want that thing in their house." Emily should have listened. The reflection that wasn't hers. For the first few days, nothing seemed wrong, but then she started noticing something strange. The mirror was always cold, even when the rest of the room was warm. Whenever she passed by, she had the odd sensation that she was being watched. And then, the reflection started to lag behind. She would turn her head and see herself turn a second later. At first, she told herself it was just her imagination. But one night, she saw something she couldn't explain. She walked past the mirror, half asleep, on her way to the bathroom, and out of the corner of her eye, her reflection didn't move. It stood there, still, smiling. Emily froze. Her heart pounded as she slowly turned her head back toward the mirror. Her reflection was normal again. But just before she looked away, it blinked. And she hadn't. The whispering in the dark. After that night, things got worse. Emily began hearing whispers, soft, distant voices coming from inside the mirror. At first, she thought it was just her neighbors, until the voices started saying her name. "Emily, let me out." She covered the mirror with a blanket, but no matter how many times she covered it, by morning the blanket was always on the floor. Then came the scratching. Light at first, like fingernails against glass. Then harder, more desperate, like something was trying to get through. Emily started sleeping in the living room, too scared to be near it, but one night she woke up to the sound of footsteps. Coming from her bedroom, the door was closed, but she could hear something moving inside. Slow, deliberate. Then, a knock. Soft, gentle, coming from inside the mirror. Emily ran. She spent the night at a friend's house, too terrified to go back. The next day, she decided the mirror had to go. The mirror wouldn't leave. She and her friend dragged it outside to the dumpster. They watched it hit the ground, glass shattering across the pavement. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt like she could breathe. That night, she slept better than she had in months, until she woke up and saw the mirror, standing in the corner of her bedroom, unbroken. Waiting. Emily screamed. Her friend rushed in, but when she turned on the lights, the mirror was gone. But on the wall where it had been, there were scratches. Deep, jagged, and in the wood, something had carved words. "You can't get rid of me." The final escape. Emily moved out the next morning. She left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, even her books. She never went back. Years later, she met someone else who had lived in that apartment. And when she asked them if they ever saw anything strange, they went pale and whispered, "Did you hear the whispers too?" The mirror is still out there. Some say mirrors are just glass and reflection, but others believe that mirrors are portals, gateways to something else. Something that watches, something that listens, something that wants to be free. So if you ever find an old mirror, one that feels wrong, one that seems too cold, one that moves when you don't, do not bring it home. Because once it finds you, it never lets go. That's tonight's story. If you've ever looked into a mirror and seen something that wasn't supposed to be there, maybe you weren't imagining it. If you liked this story, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more terrifying tales. And let me know in the comments, have you ever seen something in the mirror that wasn't you? Until next time, sleep well. The terrifying mirror, the creepiest encounter ever. Some mirrors reflect light, some mirrors reflect our past, and some mirrors reflect something else entirely. Tonight's story is about a mirror that never truly shows what's in front of it, a mirror that doesn't just reflect you, it watches you, it remembers you, and if you stare too long, it might take you. The estate sale. In 2015, Derek Langley, an antique collector, was browsing an estate sale in upstate New York. The mansion had once belonged to the Donovan family, an old wealthy lineage that had mysteriously disappeared in the 1960s. As Derek wandered through the dusty halls, he found a mirror. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, with an ornate golden frame covered in strange engravings, symbols he had never seen before. The glass itself was too perfect. It didn't have a single scratch, smudge, or sign of aging. It looked new, despite sitting in an abandoned mansion for over 50 years. The estate dealer gave it to him for free. "Just take it," she said quickly. Derek should have asked why. The first sign. That night, Derek set up the mirror in his bedroom. For the first few days, nothing happened. Then, one night, he woke up feeling strange, like someone was in the room with him. He turned over, half asleep, and caught a glimpse of the mirror. His reflection was standing up. Derek was still lying in bed, but his reflection was watching him. He shot up, heart pounding, and his reflection snapped back to normal. Derek didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The shadows behind the glass. Over the next few days, things got worse. Derek started hearing whispers, soft, indistinct, coming from the mirror. Sometimes, out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw shadows moving inside the glass. Not in the room, but inside the reflection itself. One night, as he was brushing his teeth, he looked into the mirror and saw something else standing behind him. A tall, thin figure. It had no eyes, just a mouth slowly curling into a grin. Derek spun around. Nothing was there. But when he turned back to the mirror, the figure was closer. The thing that stepped out. Derek decided he had to get rid of the mirror. That night, he dragged it outside to the dumpster and left it there. He felt relieved, like a weight had been lifted off his chest. But as he walked back inside, he froze. His bedroom light was on, and in the window, he saw a silhouette, standing in front of the mirror. Derek hadn't left the lights on, and he was alone. Shaking, he stepped inside. The room was empty. The mirror was back in its place, and on the surface of the glass, there were handprints, not his own. The final night. Derek didn't leave his room that night. He sat on his bed, watching the mirror, heart racing, waiting for something to happen. Around 3 a.m., the whispers started again. This time, they were clear. "Let me out." The glass rippled, like water. Then, a hand pressed against the inside of the glass, followed by a face, Derek's own face. But not him. The thing inside the mirror looked just like him. But its smile was too wide. Its eyes were all wrong. And then, it stepped forward, out of the glass, and Derek felt something pull him. Something cold, something hungry. The last thing he saw before he blacked out was himself, smiling back at him. The morning after, Derek's neighbors found him unconscious on the floor the next morning. His mirror was gone, vanished, and when he looked into any other mirror after that, he saw nothing. No reflection, just empty glass. As if he was no longer the one who still exists. No one knows what happened to Derek's mirror. Some say it was never a mirror at all. Some say it was a gateway, a doorway to something else. And some believe that whatever stepped out that night wasn't Derek. So if you ever find a mirror that feels too cold, if your reflection ever lags behind, if you ever hear whispers coming from the glass, turn it around, walk away, and never look back. Because if you stare too long, it might stare back. And next time, it might take your place. That's tonight's story. If you've ever looked into a mirror and seen something wrong, maybe you weren't imagining it. If you liked this story, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more terrifying tales. And let me know in the comments. Have you ever seen something in the mirror that wasn't supposed to be there? Until next time, sleep well